Hey there, authors. Got a suck list? You know, those repetitive soul-sucking tasks that eat up your time? Well, it's time to kick them to the curb. I write an email newsletter every week called Author Automations, and I'll help you zap those tasks into automations you can set and forget. We're talking easy, no-code tools like Zapier and Make.com to streamline your workflows and give you more time to write. So if you're ready to ditch your suck list, subscribe to Author Automations at authorautomations.com, and let's get you back to the good stuff, writing.
Welcome back, everyone. We're kicking off another deep dive today. And, as we're getting closer to the new year, we always get bombarded with this idea of setting goals.
Oh, yeah.
Resolutions, right? But it's like February rolls around and poof, all that motivation's gone.
It's like clockwork.
Exactly. So today we're going to kind of flip the script and explore a new way of thinking about goals.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
This is all about values-based goals.
Values-based goals.
Yeah. The idea is instead of focusing on like specific outcomes, like lose 10 pounds or write a novel, we're going to look at how our core values can guide us.
Interesting. So we have like a sort of internal compass guiding our goals instead of these external pressures.
Exactly. And we've got two sources that we're diving into today. One is an article called Values-Based Goals, Transform Resolutions into Success by Shel Honaker.
Okay.
It's published in Indie Author Magazine.
I'll have to check that out.
And the other one is an excerpt from a piece of writing, which I'll tell you a little bit more about later.
Cool. So let's get into it. How does this whole values-based thing actually work?
All right. So picture this. Instead of saying, I'm going to lose 10 pounds, you start by figuring out what really matters to you deep down. Like, what are your core values?
Okay. So it's more about the why behind the goal.
Exactly. And a great example of this is in Honaker's article. She realized that, resolutions weren't really working for her.
Yeah, I think we've all been there.
So she decided to identify her own core values. Like, what are the guiding principles behind her choices?
That's interesting. So what kind of values did she come up with?
Well, she's got a pretty diverse set. Things like financial peace, creative freedom, staying politically active, being image confident.
Wow, that's quite a range.
Oh, and she even mentions valuing lightness in her obligations.
Lightness in obligations. What does that even mean?
I think it's about not feeling overwhelmed by responsibilities.
Yeah.
Having a sense of ease.
Okay. Yeah, I can see how that would be valuable.
And she also values adventure and being ready for it.
So it sounds like she's got a good mix of both practical and aspirational values.
Yeah, and that's what's so cool about this approach, right? It's not a one-size-fits-all. It's about figuring out what truly matters to you.
That makes a lot of sense. So how do these values actually translate into goals? Can you give me an example?
Absolutely. So let's say one of your core values is financial peace.
Okay, like Honaker.
Right, like Honaker. So maybe this means you're making conscious choices about how you spend your money.
Yeah, making a budget, sticking to it.
Or maybe it influences your career decisions. Choosing a path that offers stability.
Ah, I see. So the values actually inform your actions.
Exactly. And it's not just about big decisions. It can be about small, everyday choices, too.
It's almost like a ripple effect. A single value can influence so many different areas of your life.
I like that, a ripple effect. So another one of Honaker's values is creative freedom.
Right.
Maybe that means she chooses projects that let her express herself, even if they don't pay a ton.
So it's about prioritizing what's important to you, even if it goes against conventional wisdom.
Exactly. It's about aligning your actions with your values.
This makes me wonder, how often do we set goals that actually clash with our values?
That's a really interesting question. Like, how many times have we chased something that didn't really feel right deep down?
I think we've all been there.
Yeah. So how do we actually figure out what our own core values are? It's got to be more than just saying, oh, I value this.
Right. It's got to be deeper than that.
That's where the real work comes in. And luckily, Honaker has some tips for us.
Lay it on me.
She talks about doing some serious soul searching, like journaling, asking yourself tough questions, like what brings me joy, what gives me a sense of purpose. It's really digging deep.
Sounds like it takes a good deal of self-awareness.
It definitely does. And that's where things get really interesting. You have to take the time to really understand yourself.
So it's not just about setting goals. It's about understanding who you are at your core.
You got it. And that's what we're going to explore more deeply as we continue our deep dive today.
All right. I'm ready to dive deeper. Let's do it. You mentioned earlier we have that other source about values and goals.
Yeah.
What was that all about?
Okay, so that excerpt is actually from pasted text, and it talks about a different way to think about goal setting, especially as we head into, the holiday season and look toward the new year.
Okay.
It seems like it's hinting at the same kind of values-based approach that Honecker talks about.
That's interesting. So this idea is popping up in different places, not just, self-help stuff.
Exactly. It seems like it's resonating with people.
Yeah, for sure. So, okay, we've talked about figuring out our values, but how do we actually make sure we're, living by them? It can't just be about knowing them, right? We have to actually act on them.
That is like the million-dollar question. And Honecker actually addresses this in her article.
Oh, good. Does she have any tips?
She does. She gives some really practical steps to bridge that gap. Like one of the big things she talks about is making your values part of your daily routine.
Oh, okay. So like integrating them into your everyday life.
Exactly. So for example, let's say one of your core values is connection.
Okay.
You could make a point of connecting with people every day, call a friend, have dinner with family, maybe even just send a thoughtful text.
Ah, so it's about those small actions, those little things you do consistently.
Yeah. Little by little, those small things add up.
It's a much more sustainable approach than trying to overhaul your entire life all at once.
Right. Because with this, you're shifting your focus. It's not about the outcome, it's more about the process,
Yeah, instead of being laser focused on a specific goal, it's about aligning your everyday actions with what matters to you.
Exactly. And remember, values can change. They evolve as you grow.
That's true. What mattered to me 5 years ago definitely isn't the same today.
So how do we stay connected to those evolving values? Well, Honecker talks about regular self-reflection.
Self-reflection.
Yeah, taking some time to check in with yourself.
Okay.
Maybe journal, meditate, or just have some quiet time to think.
And ask yourself, what really matters to me now?
Exactly. And if things aren't lining up well, it's okay to adjust.
It's all part of the journey.
Right. There's no finish line. It's about constantly evolving and growing.
Makes sense. But what about when values conflict? Like, let's say someone values financial peace and the adventure.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
Those two can feel a bit at odds, right?
Definitely. But the key is finding that balance.
Balance.
Like maybe you find ways to have adventures that don't cost a fortune.
Okay.
Or maybe you focus on financial stability for a while so you can have more freedom later.
Right, so it's about prioritizing and compromising.
Yeah. It's about honoring both values without completely sacrificing one for the other.
I like that. And ultimately, it's about creating a life that feels good to you, right?
Absolutely. It's not about being perfect or following rigid rules. It's about finding what works for you and creating a life that, feels fulfilling.
Okay, so we're not talking about outcomes here. We're talking about direction.
Exactly. It's like having a compass that points you towards your true north.
Even when the path gets a little rough.
Even when it gets rough. So I think this approach can not only help us reach our goals, but also live a more meaningful life.
I agree. So as we're heading into this new year, what are some key things our listeners can take away from all this?
I think this year, as we go into the new year, maybe it's time to ditch the whole resolution thing.
Yeah, resolutions always feel so rigid.
Like, I have to achieve this.
Exactly. It's like setting yourself up for failure almost.
Right. So instead of saying, I'm going to run a marathon, maybe ask yourself, what do I really want to embody this year?
Yeah. Like what values are important to me?
Maybe it's discipline or perseverance or just a commitment to being healthy.
And then your actions become a reflection of that.
It takes the pressure off, right? It becomes less about the end goal and more about just living in alignment with those values.
Exactly. And I think that's what makes it so powerful. It's not about fitting into some mold. It's about creating a life that feels true to you.
This whole conversation has really made me think about how we set goals based on what we think we should be doing.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Like what we see on social media or what society tells us is successful.
And then we try to force ourselves into that box.
Without even stopping to think if it actually aligns with what do you want.
Right. And that's probably why so many resolutions fail. They're not really rooted in anything meaningful.
But when your actions are driven by your values, it becomes less about willpower and more about purpose.
Like you're not just going through the motions, you're actually living a life that feels authentic.
Yeah. So as we're heading into this new year, maybe the best resolution is to just live more intentionally.
To really think about what matters to us.
And to make choices that reflect those values every single day.
Because at the end of the day, it's not about achieving some arbitrary definition of success. It's about creating a life that feels fulfilling and aligned with who you truly are.
So for everyone listening out there, we want to leave you with a little challenge. Take some time this week to reflect on your own core values.
What are the things that truly matter to you? What principles do you want to guide your life?
Write them down, visualize them, and then start looking for ways to bring those values into your daily life.
Because when you live in alignment with your values, that's when you unlock a level of purpose and fulfillment that no resolution could ever give you.
That's right. So thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
And until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep living a life that truly reflects who you are.